Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've grabbed yourself something to eat and made yourself a fresh coffee. We're just going to launch a poll now that will ask you some questions that are relevant to the presentations you've just heard while we're waiting for our panelists to come on board. I must thank them all for providing such a diversity of presentations and giving us a real sense of what's happening locally in the research space. And I hope that if you're interested in participating, you took note of particular contact details in order for you to participate. Okay, I can see some people are coming on board now. So if you haven't made yourself a coffee, maybe take a quick moment to make one now while everyone's coming on board. Okay, I can see some lovely faces. There's Roxanne. Can see Tone. There's Anita. People, there's Dennis. We must catch up more like this on a Sunday morning well, kind of almost afternoon. It's still morning. Okay. We're just about to end the poll now, so I'll share the results with you all. Welcome aboard, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday morning. You all look bright and cheery. I hope you've had your coffees and your chocolate and anything else. Hi, Corey.
Hi.
Good to see you. Look, I might just start us off pretty quickly because that was quite a diversity of presentations that the community were able to have a look at. So thank you. Tony, you must be getting sick of us by now. This is your second day in a row.
Never sick of you and Huntingers Victoria, Tammy.
Look, can I say congratulations on the presentations. It was fantastic to see such a diversity of research happening here and such opportunities for people to participate in all of those research projects. So again, I encourage the community to take those contact details down. If you miss them, please get in touch with us and we're quite happy to provide you with those details. So I might just start, and one of the main questions which I'm sure you'll all have an answer to is how has COVID impacted on the research that's happening in each of your areas at the moment? I'm going to look at one of you in a minute and ask you to respond. Roxanne, you go for it. Well done. Trust Roxanne to start.
Definitely, there was a little bit of a pause. It did slow things down, but as we had to with our clinical services, we pretty much picked up some of that slack by increasing our Zoom, our video conferencing capacity. Yeah. So we were able to maintain a number of commitments that we had to research during that time. And as we're moving into what is going to be COVID normal, we're sort of slowly picking up the face-to-face consultations as we move forward.
Has it had an impact on anyone else at this point in time in terms of delaying any research?
Yeah, I think just from Monash, obviously I'm representing Julie's lab from Monash, and it's really just been about, I suppose, restructuring projects for us. It's obviously limiting a lot of the face-to-face research that we can do. So some of our postdoc projects have had to really been reshaped in terms of doing them through online or doing mail outs or perhaps even really delaying projects by a year or so. And certainly some of the research that we can do with our honours students as well has had to, use existing databases and things like that. So it's really kind of limited the community engagement this year.
So what you're all saying is watch this space. Even though it has had an initial impact, you're all making adjustments to try and continue on with your invaluable research.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all really committed to our HT research and research in general, and it has been an extremely challenging year, not just for all the changes we've had to make to the visits and getting people in for the research visits or pausing them or changing the in-person visits to online visits or telephone visits, but also looking after ourselves and our colleagues, because it's been a very hard year personally as well. We're all living through a global pandemic, and I think looking after our workforce has been something that we've had to do on top of everything else this year.
Well said, Anita. Very well said.
Tammy, I might just add that fortunately it's had very little impact on the clinical trials that we're running at the Royal Melbourne, and I'm pretty sure at Monash as well. Fortunately, the hospitals have allowed us to continue the WAVE and Roche trials, which has been excellent for the community and for the research.
That's a really good segue, Dennis, because one of the questions that came in while all your presentations were on is that if in any of the trials were successful, any of the phase 3 trials that and they're approved, how long would it take for it to be available to the community?
Well, that's a good question for which I don't have a good answer, unfortunately.
Well, I expect you all to have answers to all of these questions today.
Yeah, look, it does take years for drugs to even move from phase 3 into general use. Fortunately, both the Roche and the WAVE trials are offering sort of open label extension trials as well. So look, it won't be available to everyone in the community, but certainly be available to a proportion of people while we work out how well these drugs are working. That's really the first step.
Well, Dennis, I know you'll be able, I thought that was brilliantly answered, by the way. So the other question, which can be for all of you too, is there any available medication at this point in time to treat HD? That was a question that was sent in by a community member.
So I might continue.
Mhm.
Look, in terms of the trials that we're running, these are trials for medications that actually get at the cause of the disease, of Huntington's disease, and try and stop, and who knows, possibly reverse the impact of the illness. Every other drug that we have at the moment is really for treating symptoms, whether that be for treating the movements or treating depression, etc. They're all what we call symptomatic treatments at the moment.
So Dennis, you answered that brilliantly. I don't know why you didn't think you would. I have a question for Tony and then for Corey. Tony, just in relation to your research, and thank you for putting that in layman's terms, by the way, because I know that for all of you, it's a great deal of research that you needed to condense in a very short period of time. So you should all get an award for that for a start. So are you saying through your research that can it be proven that the onset of HD can be delayed through diet, exercise, brain stimulation, and maintaining low stress levels? And how significant could that delay be?
Yeah, so our work with the preclinical model, the mouse model of Huntington's disease, has shown that factors like exercise, cognitive stimulation can delay onset. It's very clear, and it's been replicated by colleagues around the world, and there's some evidence for diet. It's been studied much less in these preclinical models. The challenge is getting the high level evidence from human cohorts, and one of the differences is getting that funded. Of course, a pharmaceutical company can fund a large clinical trial like the Roche and WAVE trials. Getting an exercise intervention, a brain stimulation intervention, particularly in Australia, funded by our government, is extremely challenging. I must say, we're not investing enough in health and medical research. We're not investing enough in science. And therefore, look at the vaccines for COVID-19. You can develop multiple vaccines that are effective 9 months from detecting a new virus. That shows for anything, if you have the will, if you have the funding, if you have the resources, you can prevent and treat and cure any disease. It's proven that more or less, yeah. I think.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's a really valid point that it is a valid point that you make, Tony. Maybe that's our next advocacy point as a group. We'll go marching to Canberra. Tony, what do you think?
Absolutely, I'm there.
You can draw the emblem, and Dennis can write the speech, and we'll come
along
with you guys.
Cyclists on board as well.
Thank you for answering that. I really appreciate it. Corey, could you, we had some community members who have participated in your particular piece of research. Would you want to comment on that particularly and some of the results that you've found for those that haven't been a part of it?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to just give you a quick overview of what I did, like very briefly?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so basically we just looked at how the gut is affected in Huntington's disease, because there's lots of research in other areas and other diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and things like that, that the gut is really important, and that maybe it might affect the brain, or maybe potentially even there might be some disease processes that might start in the gut and then go to the brain, or vice versa. So it's kind of a really interesting area, and definitely a big hot topic in the scientific and neuroscience community generally. So we really wanted to look at it in Huntington's disease because, and Tony as well has done a bit of research in this area as well with the mouse models, which is really interesting. But basically what we did is we looked at how the gut is affected in Huntington's disease by getting people to supply stool samples, which is an interesting way to do it. But it actually is it's the best way to look at the gut. And so we did, so we looked at the gut in people with HD that are both symptomatic and haven't or that don't have symptoms. And basically overall what we found is that compared to people without the HD gene, that there are definitely some changes in the gut. There's kind of more indicated that the gut might be a bit more imbalanced, and that potentially might link to other disease processes like neuroinflammation and things like that as well. So really what that means is that potentially, maybe things might start in the gut early. We don't know whether it's, kind of a cause of HD, or perhaps it's something that might start early. But either way, what that means is that, we do think the gut could be really important in HD, and it's something that really warrants a lot more research. I mean, certainly, if you think about some of the disease modifying treatments that are available now, they're quite invasive with things like lumbar punctures and things like that. So if the gut is an easy target and something that could actually have an impact on the disease, whether that's affecting symptoms or just even improving quality of life, I mean, then that could be really important for the HD community. So that's talking about things like looking at whether prebiotics or probiotics or other types of gut interventions might have an impact on people with HD.
I think it's an exciting piece of research, and I know, as you've mentioned, other disease groups are actually also looking at that area as well at the moment and seeing if there's any correlation. So the best of luck with that research, and I hope it gives us some practical tips that the community can adopt and hopefully assist them in their everyday lives.
Thank you. And I should just mention quickly as well is that we also did link it to things like cognitive performance, so that we did find that there were relationships between specific bacteria in the gut and people's thinking skills, and also motor signs as well. So it's something that we're going to continue researching in our lab with IFAD, and something that we're going to kind of extend so we can really get a really good understanding about what's going on.
Well, please keep us up to date, because I'm sure the community would be really interested in hearing in what's happening in that space on an ongoing basis.
Definitely.
Roxanne and Dennison and Anita, could you, the three of you, comment on how you respectively connect research to your clinical work as services? Because I think that's very, very unique in terms of what you're doing. Roxanne, you can go first if you like.
So we obviously, our research team is distinct from our clinical team. So anyone can ring and express interest and find out more about being a participant in the research, and anyone with a diagnosis, or whether it's family and friends just interested in finding out more about research, they can ring and talk to our research coordinator and register to be a participant. And we obviously have a very broad clinical team who provide services. So if I think you're asking, Tammy, are you, what's the link between the two?
Yeah, sort of, because what I think is very unique about both your services is that the clinical expertise that you have almost drives your interest in specific areas of research.
Yeah, and I think the research is really important, because research generates interest, it generates awareness, which ultimately contributes to service improvement. We have a number of clinical research that treat, looking at symptom management. We've done research into mindfulness, we've research into end of life and advanced care planning, and a lot of that that's really where the clinical work that we do has resulted in some research to ultimately, hopefully, improve the clinical treatments and things on offer, and the services are available.
Is there anything that, because I know that research has been going on for some time at Calvary, is there anything that you can recall that specifically improved service delivery?
I think a lot, really, because often we'll have an idea for a particular program. Photo Voice, the Photo Voice
Yes.
communication program is a
I
good
must
example.
confess, Roxanne, that was the one I was thinking of.
And we obviously didn't have resources that where we were able to develop up that program without looking at researching it. So what we did was we developed up a research idea around Photo Voice. We were then able to gain some philanthropic funding to run a pilot program, which enabled us to test the utility of that program, but also enabled us to develop up the tools we needed to embed that as an ongoing program. So it enabled us to create the referral pathways, the resources we need to run that program, so that once the research money ran out, we were able then to incorporate that program as part of our clinical services. And we're doing that, you know, with the mindfulness program is another example where research has actually contributed to service development.
Yeah, no, thank you. I didn't want to sort of direct you in an area, Roxanne. So when I said that's the one,
Glad we're in tune, Tammy.
Yes, and we're doing it virtually, Roxanne. Who knew? And Dennis and Anita, with respect to your clinic and the service, I'd really love it if you could both comment on how there's been a really lovely correlation, particularly in relation to telehealth, of how your clinical expertise has kind of driven your research interests as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. So yeah, look, I'll answer the second question first. And you've given me a hint about what to talk about with the telehealth.
I didn't with Roxanne, so you know I'm not trying to play favourites, Roxanne. I apologise.
So look, the telehealth project was in part a research project because it needed to be for us to show that it was a value, and as we heard with Sarah, it certainly had value to people with Huntington's carers and families, and also had economic value. As a result of that project, we've now been funded recurrently by the government to provide ongoing telehealth to the community. So that, I mean, I think that's a great example of the value of the research and being embedded in that telehealth project. And that included economic evaluation as well, which is increasingly important to show that you know, things do you know, save money, and that's not just saving money for salaries; it's saving money for people with HD and their families in terms of travel, childcare, etc. So in terms of your first question, we've for a very long time now, as you know, part of a large teaching hospital, it's important that we try and embed our research into the clinical work. So most people who come in will be offered or asked if they will participate in research. In most situations, that's actually as simple as, well, it's not simple, but with consent, asking permission from people who come to this unit for us to use the data we collect as part of our clinical care. Yep. And that could be interviews, it could be questionnaires, it could be scans that we take, which are being done anyway. And that's a really valuable resource. And because we did that over many years, I'll use one example. So a lot of the people who come to our service will have what's called a lumbar puncture, where we look at the cerebrospinal fluid. And we've been able to collect those samples over many, many years. And we've been able to show by going backwards to the samples that a protein in the CSF called neurofilament can help us distinguish people who have a primary psychiatric disorder from those who have a neurocognitive disorder. And now that's been expanded into a much larger trial funded by the NHMRC to look at the same protein in blood. I mean, it's pretty hard to go around doing lumbar punctures on everyone, much easier to do blood tests. And that project, which Anita is the project manager of, is called the MIND Project, Markers in Neuropsychiatric Disorders. And that is being now extended not just to people we see, but also into general practice to try and see if we can pick things up as early as possible.
I mean, that's fantastic news. And while everyone was speaking, Tony, I thought of you because I know that your research particularly influenced us as an organisation in terms of encouraging people to look after their mental and physical health. The work that you and Martin Delaticchi did even had me doing a run, for God's sake, and I never do that. And the community really took that on board as practical steps that they could take in order to assist them to manage their own Huntington's disease and overall health. So you all interconnect, and it's fantastic. I know that Anita was very interested. Usually we have our face-to-face, and Anita is the one that asks our community what input they would have in relation to where we're heading in research and whether you believe we're heading in the right direction. It's a little bit difficult to participate in that way when it's virtual, but I would encourage you to send in your responses, and we will definitely share it with the HRGV group. We have almost gone over time, which is always my problem. I apologise as a moderator. I get too interested. I want to thank you all for participating today. Thank you. The community really enjoy these opportunities to speak directly with you. Please keep doing what you're doing, and if there's anything that we can do as an organisation on behalf of the community to assist you in your research endeavours, please do not hesitate to ask. So I'm going to let you, unless you have any final comments. Do any of you have any final comments?
Having watched the American elections for a long time, I have to correct some fake news here, Tammy. I think you actually walked, not ran that.
So look, it's a matter of interpretation, Dennis. Okay, I felt
heels.
it was a quick. It wasn't in high. Yeah, it was in high heels. Thank you, Anita. I'd like to see you run in high heels.
Exactly.
And Corey, on that note, I think you should be doing some research on the impact of chocolate for people with Huntington's disease, because I think it will assist them. Just putting it out there.
So yes, just for the community to get into touch with us if they have any questions, if you want any further clarifications, our details are all out there. If you Google us, or you can go through Huntington's Victoria as well.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Dennis, for that comment. I appreciate. Sorry, Tony.
I think there's a lot of hope now with these trials. You know, there's never been so much hope for Huntington's disease, so it's very exciting times, and lots to be very positive about.
Yeah.
And Tony, on that note, I can't tell you how proud we were as a community with respect to you moderating the international research session yesterday. We had so much positive feedback, and we took personal pride in you moderating that one. So thank you. We're very lucky to have you all.
No, the work with Ed Wild and Paul Zune and Sarah Tabrizi, it dovetails with what Dennis and Anita were talking about in Melbourne. So you can see how international it is. They were looking at neurofilament light as well. So it's a very interesting time with these extraordinary technologies. So it's great to see all this research going on in Melbourne, but also around the world.
I know everyone's keen to go to lunch and we're over time, but I just want to also raise the concept that we're not just working in clinical trials and technology and, you know, ASOs and gene silencing, but there's also a lot of work going on in models of care and quality of care. And, you know, if the cure, it comes 10 years later, 5 years later, 3 years later, there's still a lot of energy and action being put into how we can help people now in terms of living their best life.
Very good point, Anita. Very good point. And when we have another panel, I'll invite you all at one time, and Dennis will be invited at a much later time. I think 1 a.m. What do you think, Tony? 1 a.m. All of you can come at another time after that comment before. Can I just say? And that was a really good point.
Speed it up, Tammy. Double speed.
Double speed. Thank you all. Anita, that was a really lovely point to end it on. Have a lovely rest of a Sunday. I'd encourage all the community to continue to stay online and join me for a live feedback session. Please join me in thanking our panelists. See you guys.
Great to be here. Thank you.